Now, give us a little bit of background, where you come from, and basically how you got in love with music. Who were some of the first artists and stuff that came up for you?
For me, it was super simple. My dad has the best record collection ever. He's born in '53, so when Black Sabbath and the bands came out, he was the perfect age. So he started collecting everything. So when he had me, when he was 22, by that time everything was there already in the record collection. So I've always been a metalhead. With my, what do you call it, my roots in the heavy rock.
Sure.
So that's where I got in contact with it. And then, of course, like any adolescent aspiring musician, you search for your own little bit more extreme stuff. Right. So I got into death metal, and having the rock background and the death metal that I found later on, it was actually fun to try to create music around that stuff. You know.
Sure.
Keeping it very melodic, like it's always been. So.
Yeah. Well, with so many of those great bands from the '70s, what do you think it was about the time back then that made such a fertile time for such legendary bands?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think the will to do something that's not streamlined, and it's like, I think it was slightly rebellious act to begin with, like punk rock, but it still had its roots in rhythm and blues, so it still had a shape, a form, a format, if you will, and I think a lot of people got into it. You know, it was a kick against, you know, ordinary life, I think, a little bit. So, and it's a lot of energy and emotion in this kind of music, and you can really dig deep into it. So it's not that shallow as some pop music might be, or what's popular at the time. So I think people experimenting with all sorts of things, obviously, but with music as well. So it's But I'm not sure why. I was not that young. I was not that old at the time. But
sure. It seemed like it was very innocent. There wasn't the internet and the record companies. There wasn't a lot of pressure to sound like this. They pretty much were on their own to
They were really
create
on
their own.
I think, and just having, I saw this really old clip with Sabbath playing on one of these talk shows they had back then, where you could see Elvis probably and artists like that, and they played, and it was playback, I guess, and such, but it was, that must have been such a shock for viewers at the time, '69 or you know, whenever it was, and having this metal band, long hair, mustaches and beards and stuff, and normally everybody's really super polished on TV, right? So I think that changed music for a lot of people.
So groups like Sabbath, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin,
Rainbow,
Richie Blackmore, all that.
It's one of my favorites. As a songwriter, he's amazing.
Sure. Now, where you grew up in Sweden was small town?
Well, I'm from outside of Gothenburg, which is the second biggest city in Sweden, like a suburb, you can say. The cool thing when I grew up was that we still had, which we don't anymore, youth centers. So it was something we passed time between, you know, after school up until, you know, dinner time or whatever, you know. And these youth centers, they had rehearsal spaces, you know. They had an actual drum kit and amplifiers and instruments, so you got to try it out, like for real, not on a computer, because that wasn't there. And also you didn't have to pay all that money to get a drum kit. So if you wanted to, a couple hours a week, you and your friends could just get together and try out instruments. So,
and this was provided by the city?
Yeah, but back then it was government funded. And it was, I think, a really good thing, because you could channel a lot of frustration from the suburbs and all that into music instead of into problems and trouble.
You had a place to go. And
so it was really good people working there. They scooped me up right away because they saw I was so interested in it. So I had my upbringing pretty much there, together with my dad's record collection. You know, so it's But I think that's from my generation or our generation. That was absolutely important, because they had like competitions too, like rock band competitions. Battle of the Bands sort of thing. And so you went 2-3 hours a week to this youth center, rehearsed for this one show you're gonna do a year later. You know, and that's something that it was important. It's not around anymore.
It caused you to create a focus or a dedication or sacrifice to get better.
Yeah, well, that's in the end you just love playing your instrument, obviously. You love hearing it just come into place, the music together. Like you're actually starting to get tight together with a drummer, or stuff like that. And that's really cool. But you wanted to show this to other people too. So that's when you went to these competitions, stuff like that. I think today it's very different because music is in your face all the time. I mean, the internet, obviously, and all the social media. It's like, I think it's easier for bands to actually create something that looks very professional, sounds very professional, but it's harder because of all the other bands doing the same thing. It's like the competition today is very stiff, very stiff. So back then it was a few bands that actually played real shows, and you went to see those, and that's where you found out that this is what you want to spend your life doing.
Yeah.
Nowadays everybody's in a band. Or, I mean, that's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah, everybody can make music.
Yeah.
You know, you used to have a budget to go in a big studio and now anybody can make it or post a video.
I'm not sure if it's better or worse, because back then it was very hard to.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't have a record label, it was really hard for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's easier to make it, but it's harder to stand out.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's, you know.
But it's a different time, and it's got pros and cons.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Now, you played in a few like garage bands before in Flames. Now, how did the gig come about? Tell us how you ended up joining the band.
Oh wow, yeah, that's actually my cousin's fault.
Blame him.
Yeah, no, it's the coolest thing. I mean, him and Jesper, was the founding member of the band, together with Johan and Glenn. They were childhood friends.
Okay.
So when it came to, he always talked about Jesper whenever we met up, and said, well, he's got this really cool band, you should check him out. And I was playing on my side, so whenever he met Jesper, he's like, yeah, my cousin he's playing in different bands and stuff. So all of a sudden, they felt like they needed a drummer.
Yeah.
And since I've been at the youth center for a couple of years, trying to teach other people how to play a little bit, so I had to learn a little bit of drums. I still sucked. But so when they needed a drummer, my cousin told Jesper, let Björn try out, and so I did. And Jesper was super happy because he got away from the fucking drums. And I was super happy because they let me go in as a songwriter right away. And that was a little bit of not a deal breaker, but it made me very happy, because that's one thing to sit there and be playing what somebody else writes, and there's a different thing to actually create something and together with the guys. And it was a good feeling. It was a really good feeling.
More of you in the end product.
Yeah. And also this was a band that actually had a record deal at the time.
Yeah.
So that means that you get to record in a proper studio. There's a budget for it, and also shows were lining up. So all of a sudden we're going to play live as well, like properly, in front of a paying audience, And so that was really cool. Got to do some support shows and stuff, and some festivals. And it was easy.